part of living uncaged means not just plugging into systems, not just plugging into the matrix, but actually showing up at work and in life on your own terms. And you have to figure out what you want. But take the 9-to-5 world, the corporate reality that many of us are dealing with. Since COVID, it's become pretty daunting. It used to be, but it's become even worse since COVID when everything's digital, everything's always on, everything is Zoom based. And a lot of people have felt that pain. And for those that follow this show, we talk about strategies and tactics for getting out of that caged state and living uncaged, where you're controlling how you show up at the 9-to-5, showing up on your terms and making it work for you, reducing hours, buying back time freedom, getting more energy so that you can spend it on the life you actually want. We want to keep the 9-to-5 in place, but there's so much more power we have to use that to our advantage. That's why I'm excited to bring up quiet quitting. I've talked about this before, but I'm really pumped to bring my guest, Paige West, to you. Paige was at the center of the CNN and Good Morning America interviews and other national news coverage for quiet quitting when it started to take hold. Quiet quitting was something that I did years ago in taking control of corporate and implemented other strategies as well. But I wanted to get Paige's take, especially as a representative of Gen Z. What is the mindset of someone early in your career? What does that look like? What are the choices, the variables that you're weighing? Paige gets really deep into this, and we really compare and contrast the millennial generation, which is me, with the Gen Z generation that she represents, and understand workplace value systems and what that could mean for you and what's possible. So I'm really pumped to share this with you. There's lots of actionable wisdom that Paige shares. You can see in the show notes that you can find her on YouTube. And before we dive into things, just one quick plug. If you find value in Uncage Yourself and these types of conversations, please jump on over to Apple Podcasts and or Spotify. Leave a quick, honest, written review. It means the world to me. Helps us get this podcast, get this mission out there to others that need it. All right, let's dive in with Paige. Growing up, society taught you to follow the script by choosing a career path and climbing the ladder. But for many people, this promise falls flat. Work suffocates them and life becomes painful. Here, you're trapped in what I call the corporate cage. Fortunately, there's a way out. You can take control of your corporate job and unlock a life of freedom. I call this living uncaged. Hi, this is your host, Matt Doan. I'm a coach, creator, and entrepreneur. Uncaging people is my mission because it's been my exact life journey. This show provides you the stories, principles, and tactics to make it happen. Welcome to Uncage Yourself. Hey, Paige, welcome to Uncage Yourself.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Ever since I learned about you, I saw you on Good Morning America and CNN and starting to lead the messaging on the whole quiet quitting movement. I just so naturally gravitated with you. So I can't wait to dive in. And I'm really intrigued to dive into Gen Z versus millennial worldviews. I think there's a lot of light we can shed for people today. So let's have some fun.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's get started though on something very specific. On your YouTube channel, you talk a lot about doing the inner work to clarify your direction. Practically speaking, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I'll start by, defining what I would say inner work is. So to me, inner work is, any type of mindset activity that's going to help you learn why your inner thoughts, your hopes, your dreams are not aligned with your current external action. So whatever your life is currently looking like on the outside, whatever activities you're partaking in, how are they not aligned with the thoughts you're having in your head? So that's how I would first of all describe it, and trying to find a place where those meet. So that's the purpose of inner work, is trying to get those two to meet. So to me, the three main things that I did, and that I continue to do in terms of inner work are to start with limiting beliefs. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about limiting beliefs before, but figuring out where those come from, what is keeping them at the forefront of my brain, and then trying to rewire that mindset to overcome those beliefs. So, and for those who don't know what limiting beliefs are, they're basically any belief that you have, any truth you tell yourself that is holding you back from something that is actually possible. So that's the first thing I would say I do. The second one in terms of inner work is figuring out how to listen to my intuition more and be able to tell that difference between those fleeting feelings that I have and that deep feeling. That's something that, sticks with me for a while, that's worth listening to. And, for me, that inner voice was consistently telling me that the job I was in was not the right one. And it took me a while to actually trust that voice and listen to it. And then the last one I would say is figuring out what my true values are. So figuring out what they are and then trying to create a plan and in goals and action steps that are going to align my life with those true values. I feel like a lot of people, myself included, didn't know what my values were and how those aligned with my career path or, what I was doing for work or my hobbies or who my friends were even. It's hard to really analyze that until you sit down and do it. So that's how I would describe my inner work that I've done.
Super valuable when you talk about matching up the inner and outer worlds and seeing how well they align. Because when you have alignment, this is one of those things where you feel better. And when you feel good, you're infinitely more capable. You're in a better emotional state. You can do more. You're less pulled down by what's happening outside you.
Definitely.
Could you talk about any tangible things you do? Is it like meditation, journaling? Are there any people in your life that you go to make this really clarify for this alignment?
Yeah. So I would say journaling has never been something that resonated with me very well. And I know that's a big one people talk about with inner work. I'm much more a verbal inner work type of person. So I do like to talk it out. So I'll talk to any, trusted friends, my husband, someone I go to a lot to talk things through. Basically anyone that can just listen to what I'm saying. Because at the end of the day, it is inner work for a reason. I'm really just trying to let out those thoughts and those feelings to someone that is willing to listen. But on top of that, besides just talking to someone, I wouldn't say meditate because specifically I am thinking, and I know, meditation, you're trying to get to that state of peace, recognize the thoughts, let them go. I more will sit and just think in general. Sometimes that's by looking at journaling prompts and thinking through those questions. There's a few books that I've gone through that talk about specific exercises. Claim Your Power is a great book that I went through to, really have a structured way to start inner work. That was probably the first step for my inner work that really felt intentional and actionable. So that's a great place to start for anyone looking to do any inner work.
Yeah, I gravitate towards externalizing. The funny thing about inner work is you have to externalize what's happening in your monkey mind, right? If you let it sit all up there, then it stays a jumbled mess. But if you externalize it, whether it's written word, spoken word, just getting out, you're sharpening, you're refining, you're learning what you're thinking by externalizing. And then you clarify, why the hell am I feeling this way? Why does the 9 to 5 make me feel like crap? What more could I do about this to change this state? But it's like a constant externalizing in whatever channel makes sense to you, whatever feels good. Love that.
Definitely.
Let's get a little bit into your backstory, if you don't mind. And I love, Paige, going way back in time to really get to the root of things. What was your childhood like?
Yeah, so good question. I think I agree. The backstory is a key component into where we're at today and why we think the way we do. My childhood, I would say the key portion of my childhood that I feel like shaped where I am now was my parents' divorce when I was 8 years old. So, I grew up in a pretty, the basic family structure of I had my mom and my dad. We were, probably middle class at the time. All the classes are changing nowadays and what that looked like, but middle class at the time. And, we had a pretty normal life. Everything felt pretty safe. We were okay financially. And then after my dad left, he still was a part of our lives for quite a bit of time in different capacities, but mainly it was my mom raising us after that. And I had two sisters and they both struggled a lot with the divorce. They were older than me. They were in their teens and, I was pretty young. And through that process, I started to find myself more and more really shaping my decisions around my family and trying to make sure I was doing things in a way as I grew up and got older that supported my family and was the safe decision for them. And I really stopped listening to myself. So, I'm getting deep quick with my childhood, but, that's really the big key moment when I look back that I see really shaped how I was when I, went to college and, what shaped the degree I chose and the path I took and, all of that. But there's definitely more to my childhood that I could go into, but I would say that's the key portion.
Sure. So if I'm to read this correctly, I mean, you're really trying to make sure that you're making safe decisions, that you are helping provide stability for your family. You're there for them. You don't want to be too risky because everyone's in a little bit of an unstable state, and you want to make sure you're doing your part to role model for them, to be there for them. And it makes sense to kind of follow the more conservative pathways, pick an option, whether it's school or longer term into your career, that feels safe, right? So,
Right.
uh, how did that play out through college and into your early career?
Yeah. So I guess the next key component of, my story of what happened was, one of my sisters ended up having a drug problem throughout, the divorce, and then on and on. She was very addicted to drugs, and she ended up having two children, and really was incapable of raising them. So they ended up being with me and my mom. My oldest sister had already moved out. My sister with the drug issue had moved out. And so it was really me and my mom raising these two kids. And this is the end of my high school years. So for me, it was really important in my mindset going into college was I need to get a job that has, a good trajectory, that is a safe choice, that when I get out of college, I'll be able to work immediately, make a pretty good salary, and then potentially move back home and help. I was still grappling with the idea of I may be adopting these children. And I should add, my sister ended up going to prison, so she wasn't even going to be around to even help. So it was really just going to be me and my mom. So that really shaped the decision to pick engineering, which is the path I chose for college. Because at the time that was, a hot career to go into, especially as a woman, it felt like a great option. I knew I would be capable of doing the classes and getting the degree. So that's the path I took. And, I luckily was able to get scholarships and everything to help support that. But my whole focus was all financial. Like, how can I get a job that's going to provide for me and for my mom and for these kids? So that was really the next step of how, again, my life really shaped the decisions I made, and, not for myself as much as for others.
Thank you for being so open with that. Those are
Yeah.
very powerful details. I really appreciate that. It adds a lot of color to your journey. I'm curious, as you were making that choice, as you're looking into engineering and kind of shaping that path, the financial aim makes a lot of sense. But did you feel any sort of friction inside as far as making that choice? Any sort of roadblock, like I want to do something else?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. There's a lot of key memories in college and post, obviously, that I can draw on and look back on. And obviously, rose-colored glasses, it's easy to look back and see those warning signs. But, the first one, obviously, to me, is that I changed majors within engineering. I had three different engineering majors. I kept switching. And that was obviously already a warning sign in my head. Like, why do I keep switching? Like, nothing felt like it fit right. And even my freshman year, I debated, like, should I even be doing engineering? Is there something more creative or, more focused on people that I could do? I eventually landed in a spot with my path that was also brought in a component of urban planning. So I got a minor in urban planning, which kind of felt like it balanced out that engineering side. Like, okay, maybe this will help me be able to use those other skills that I have, be more creative, be able to talk with people and work with people more. And it felt like kind of a good middle ground at the time. And I ended up getting an internship in a transportation engineering job, which is what I ended up doing for my actual first 9 to 5 job, the same company. And when I went and did that internship, I was working, 40 hours a week. It was pretty much trial run for the normal 9 to 5 schedule. And about halfway through, I had a moment where I called my boyfriend at the time, bawling my eyes out, saying, did I really just go to school for all of this? Like, is this really what I did? And at this point, I should add back to my family life, my two nephews that my mom had been raising while I was in college, our cousins ended up adopting them. So now they were in a safe home. They had, a family structure that was supporting them. And so that feeling of support, I still felt like I needed to be there, but financially didn't feel there as much. So I didn't feel that as much. So at this point, I realized, well, do I need to do engineering? Can I change to something else? Like, do I need to stick down this road? But at this point, I was already in, almost my last year of college. I was in that summer before my senior year of college. So I already felt like I was too far down the path, which is something I hear a lot from a lot of people, and something I felt once I was even in the job, which is, but I already invested so much time. Am I really going to waste this degree, these years of my life, this money, whatever it looks like, to change to something else?
Yeah. Sunk costs, right? It's really hard to
Yeah.
let go of that once you've accumulated. I've been on this path, and you ask yourself, how can I let go of the investments I've made, all this time I've invested? But the
Yeah.
real question is, can I continue on this path knowing that this is the rest of my life?
Right.
Can I bear this
Exactly.
trajectory? Because you can, even early, a couple years into your career, you can say pretty clearly what life is going to be like. If you follow this path, you can look at the work life situation. You can look at the compensation. You can look at the box that you're going to be in, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, how much time you'll have in work, out of work. You can model that out kind of clearly. But that sunk cost thing, it really holds people back.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you pointed out something great, which is, especially for me at the time where I was at, I mean, yeah, I'd done 4 years of school. I was 1 year into my career, but I had so many years left. Like I was going to waste those years. I mean, and I say that to anyone, like it doesn't even matter if it's 5 years left of your career you're thinking towards. Are you going to be able to look back on that and say that you're actually happy you suffered through that? That's something I say a lot. Some things are worth suffering for or working hard for, but is what you're doing actually worth that? That's, a question that's hard to answer sometimes, but important to ask.
Yeah. It's the power of regret, right? You can learn from your past regrets. You can anticipate your future regrets. You can look to your 85, 90-year-old self later in life and ask them, will you regret having done something or not taken that chance? Like you will ask yourself, will you regret these things? And the answer is strikingly clear most of the time.
Yeah,
It's like, of course I should have left that job. Of
right.
course I should have said yes to that relationship, whatever. Like clearly you get that wisdom from the future, pull it to the now and use it, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. That's so true.
Thanks for that clarity. Okay, so zoom us forward a little bit. I want to get to the point of how corporate became difficult for you. What was that situation like? What was going through your head as you got to the point of saying corporate's no longer for me?
Yeah. So when I first got into my job, the first, there was quite a few obvious points to me that I was in the wrong place and that corporate is not for me. The first one was, this is a question that came up a lot. So in my job, I had a mentor that I worked with very closely. He was also part of my onboarding team. So I spoke with him weekly. And one of the questions he asked me quite a bit, which for good reason, was, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years at this company? And every time he would ask me, I would freeze and be like, I have no idea. And I'm someone who literally said, I want to be married by 23. And I got married the month before I turned 23. I've always been a planner. So the fact that I couldn't answer that question freaked me out. I'm like, how do I not know where I want to be in 5 years at this company? And, I started realizing that this whole structure of corporate and this company was focused on this career path or, this corporate ladder that you're climbing. And where do you see yourself? How can you start working towards that and putting in energy to build up this path for what you see yourself doing in the future? And he also would ask me, who do you look up to in the company? And I also had no answer for that, which was scary and felt bad because I'm like, wow, I mean, I respect these people a lot, but I didn't want to live their life. I looked at, what their life looked like, what the jobs they did looked like, their interaction with their family, the time they had to invest in their kids. And that was a big component for me as well. I knew I wanted to have children. I wanted to be able to, be at home with my kids and help raise them as well. And be a core component of that. I didn't want to, have to send them to daycare year one. I wanted to have as much time as I could with them. And that was something that I tried to communicate with my mentor and, try to discuss alternatives or, what could this look like for me? And it just felt like something wasn't clicking. Like I couldn't figure out a way to share what I wanted and find a way to make this path actually fit. And, someone said to me at my job, I discussed this with them. I ended up speaking with a woman at the company to discuss the concept of also a family life and what that might look like, as my mentor suggested, him being a man. And, the main thing she said to me was, well, if you think about your future, you have two trains. And, by shutting this door, the door being me trying to get my professional engineering license, because that was something they were really wanting me to do and pushing me to do, which for, again, good reason. I'm going to be in the engineering field. That was a pretty common path people took. And I really didn't want to do it. And to do that, I would have needed to start studying for this exam right now. And I'm like, I don't want to study for this exam. It just felt so disconnected from where I was in my life. And she told me, there's two trains. And if you don't start studying, you're just not ever allowing this train to go. And I'm like, but to me, if I start studying, I'm getting on the train and it's going to start moving away from the station and I'm leaving this other option behind. So I was trying to find a way, well, can I keep one foot in both train and, be on both tracks at the same time somehow? And I tried to do that for months and it just felt like it wasn't working. And that was the biggest realization is I wasn't fully on the train. I wasn't ready to keep going down this path. And so many other people at my job were, and I saw their commitment to it and realized that I didn't have that. And I wanted to have that commitment. I wanted to be into the job and I wasn't.
Wow. It's you were recognizing when they say get on the train that you are cutting off other life options for yourself.
Yes.
Right? But professionally, and then when you do that, that has personal ramifications too.
Right.
It's a very difficult thing. It's hard to go into an organization like that where everyone is basically, for lack of better terms, up or out. Like choose the path, accelerate on the normal path, use the performance assessment criteria, lateral up the way that everyone else does. There aren't other alternatives, right? And if you are, you're going to be some sort of outcast, and then no one likes the feeling of that. And that's the challenge here. It's like in a corporate system, I remember feeling this a lot. How could you be your own authentic self, maximizing your strengths, delivering value to your team, to your clients or whomever they might be, and not lose yourself in the process and not cut off alternative options that might be beneficial to you and the organization later. But there's this natural push to just jump on a path and accelerate. And we don't like to wrestle with what the consequences of that choice are.
Exactly. No, definitely. That's a great point.
Wow. So talk to me as it got a little bit more existential in your head and things became really hard to deal with. What were those moments like leading up to that?
Yeah, it was a lot of contemplation of, am I going to stay in this? Am I going to keep doing this job forever? Is there a way that I can, find a middle ground, which was a big starting point for me was, maybe I need to have a discussion about going part-time and pursuing something else, or maybe it's fully quitting. And, I was wrestling with these topics in my head and starting to think about what it would look like if I actually left the job. And that kind of went down this whole path of the questions I always suggest people ask themselves when they're feeling unhappy in a job is starting with, well, is it the company? If it's not just the company, is it the field? If it's not just the field, is it, corporate as a whole, or is it the sector you're in? Like there's so many components that it could be. And I really worked through each of those by, I started by talking to as many people as I could at the company to get a better feel for what a future would look like there. I started talking about, getting out of consulting and going into the public sector. Maybe if I worked for government, it'd be less stressful. And maybe that just wasn't my vibe. That wasn't the type of job I wanted. And, the more I did these things, the more I started realizing, nope, that wasn't it. That wasn't it. That wasn't it. And I was able to get really clear and realize that, I really have always had this creative side, this need to talk with people and be involved with people, and also use the entrepreneurial skills that I know I've always had in me that I've wanted to utilize. And realizing that was the hardest thing I had to discover of, corporate might just not be for me. This engineering career might just not be for me. And then it was just a matter of, well, how can I get out? When can I get out? And what do I need to do to prepare myself, which the majority of it was financially prepare myself to actually be able to leave.
Yeah. So that leads us to that point in the great movement of quiet quitting, right?
Yep.
And that this was a strategy you were employing. And I'm going to make sure to link people to your great videos and the different articles you've been a part of so we don't rehash too much of that because you created a lot of great content. I want to get people there. I want to ask you this, Paige. How intentional and aware were you in employing this quiet quitting strategy, whether you use that label or not? Just talk to me. Was it a very, very conscious decision during that process?
Yes, definitely. That's a great question. Yeah, for me, it was very intentional. At the time, I didn't know what quiet quitting was. There wasn't a term for it yet. But I had said to myself in about March of 2021, that I'm going to quit at the end of 2021. December is going to be my last month. And my goal was to make it to the end of December to get my yearly bonus was the plan. So if I can get to the end of the year, get the bonus for my hard work for that year, and then I'm done. And, I had these specific things that I wanted to accomplish before I was able to leave it. And that's why, to me, it was very intentional because I almost had this like checklist of things. I need to have this much money saved up in the bank. I need to, have these alternative jobs that I was going to be able to do right after. And, I went from engineering and immediately was doing gig work. I was doing Instacart shopping, pet sitting, and I signed up for those things and started learning about it before I actually quit, for the purpose of being ready to at least make some money while I was trying to build up whatever it was I wanted to build up. And then the last one I did that I think is really important was I started looking at what the alternatives would be, and I started investing the money I had in my job, the money I was making currently, and learning more and, gaining new skills. So I invested in a course that I always talk about because for me, it was just the starting point of my journey of entrepreneurship. But I invested in Boss Graham Academy, which is Vanessa Lau's course. And her whole course is focused on, building a coaching program through Instagram. Although I was using YouTube at the time, I still utilized her course to learn about her business model and, how she did coaching and all the integrated details that I knew nothing about coming from college straight to the corporate world. I didn't know anything. All I'd been doing was just creating content on YouTube for fun as a hobby on the side. So for me, it was very, very intentional. But at the same time, again, there was no name for it at the time. So looking back, I'm aware that what wasn't intentional was the separation in my mind. I was much more focused on the time. Like I'm ending work at 5 p.m. and now I'm going to go sit on the couch and work on my side hustle and, plan out my financial plan and see how much money I've saved up and budget this and that to, make sure I'm not spending too much. But I didn't realize how mentally I was actually segmenting, which is, I feel like a big part of the movement that's shared now is that mentally you're segmenting your job from your life outside of work.
Mm-hmm. And so as you were quiet quitting and implementing this in the corporate world, did anything bad happen?
That's a great question. This is the funniest answer to me is I started getting better performance reviews when I started quiet quitting, ironically. So, and, I've thought about why that might be now, but, that's a big thing everyone's always afraid of or talking about is like, oh, you're going to get fired if you do that. Or, they're going to see that you're not putting in effort. But I actually was told I was doing better. And I think I just wasn't so panicked about the job anymore. I wasn't trying to climb the corporate ladder. So I wasn't overthinking every move I made. I was much more open, much more myself in meetings and willing to just share my thoughts. And I think that came across as initiative and, that I was trying my best to learn and share my opinions. I always say corporate definitely favors outgoing people. And I definitely found myself with a lot of social anxiety before I was quiet quitting. And I felt very uncomfortable sharing my thoughts. And I got more outgoing, as they say, once I was quiet quitting, which all helped with that improved performance.
Yeah, I know this story all too well. I work with my clients on this and I always ask them that question. Did anything bad happen from you reducing your stuff at work? It's like, no, I feel way better. They think I'm doing even better too. And it's just like the irony of saying no to the competition of the crowd. Where you say, I'm going to not conform to that stuff anymore. I'm going to do my own thing. And then here's the psychological implications is people go like, wow, Paige is really in control. She's got her shit together. She's really thinking through how she wants to show up. She's like being very selective with her time. She's in control. And underneath that, people say like, wow, I really admire her. Like, I want to be like her. I respect her. She gives an aura, an impact, a vibe that the rest of us anxious people don't give. We're all competing. And when everyone's competing, it's hard for anyone there to stand out. Right. And you said, no, I'm going to step over here, be my own person, be at ease, be in flow, be in alignment. Look what happens. The perception of me and my work goes up and I'm more focused and I get all this good stuff from my personal life too.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's good for everyone at the end of the day. One of the big things at my job that I heard a lot, one of the negative pieces of feedback I would get was that I was saying yes to too much and that I was almost unable to keep up with my workload because I had a habit of saying yes to everything because I was so ingrained in this, corporate lifestyle of like wanting to do as much as I could and learn as much as I could. And it was failing the company. I mean, not failing, but, I was impacting the company in a bad way because I was pushing deadlines to the last second. And once I did, like you said, took a step back and said, I'm setting my own boundaries, my work improved because I was actually getting the work done. I said I was going to get done. I was doing better work. I was better at checking over my work because I was giving myself a fair workload, which obviously in consulting, you're more capable of, in a sense, controlling that. Not all environments are capable of that, but it did really make a difference.
Yeah. I think about that term you used earlier, limiting beliefs. So many people want to do what you did, which I did years ago, which is step away, do things on your own terms within a 9 to 5 system so that it feels better. They get a benefit, you get a benefit, all that jazz. But we have this fear, these limiting beliefs. I can't do that. The pressures, the anxieties. And what is that? What that really is the story going on between your two ears about what is true. How much of that is factually, like objectively true out there? Are they actually putting pressures on you? Are they doing things to you, saying things like reporting you, dinging you on performance reviews? Are those things happening? Because if they're not, the likelihood is the story between your head is completely limiting your ability to do this. When you change that story and do what you did, externalize what you want, clarify what's going on, sift through your emotions and say like, well, the actions are pretty clear. The 9 to 5 thing isn't doing it for me. I don't find purpose or meaning, but it provides good utility. How do I make this work for the foreseeable future on my terms? And then you start taking bold actions, right?
Right. Exactly. No, that's a great point.
Love it. Here's something I really want to dig in with you because you and I represent two generations, right? Millennial and Gen Z. And I would love from your perspective, I admire, when I say this is a very broad category, but I admire the Gen Z value system and what I'm seeing, the energy and the priorities that Gen Zers have. It's something that I've developed later in life now, right? In my 30s. And it's something I'm really interested in because you see almost a conflict. The millennial generation, as we were talking earlier, I think is the end of the industrial era. We were handed down the story generation after generation, which plug into a default path. As my friend Paul Millard would say, is like, you pick a default path, optimize that, and that's the best you can do. In reality, that default path thing starts to feel uncomfortable. And I'd say even in the Gen Z world, default paths as a whole are starting to be just avoided. That's my take. But I would love if you could compare and contrast the worldviews that you're seeing out there. That might be quite insightful.
Yeah. An interesting one that I've noticed a lot is the difference in loyalty, or what loyalty means to a company. That's a big one. You know, I've heard from a lot of people in the millennial generation, some who aren't really fond of, you know, the path I'm taking or what I'm doing, that, you know, it was a lot more normal, like you're saying, to pick that default path, pick a company and show your loyalty to them. And, you know, if you put something into it, they're going to give you something back. That, you know, what you put in, you will get back. But, you know, what I saw, and that I think a lot of other, you know, Gen Zs are seeing, is that's not always the case. And, you know, not every company, most companies are not as loyal back to you as you feel that you're being to them. So I think the loyalty is a huge component of that, and realizing that, you know, your career really is in your own hands. It's not in the hands of your employer or your company. You really have that power to be able to make a change and, you know, create that path for yourself. You just have to be willing to think about it and to try and to break through those limiting beliefs like we're talking about. So I think also Gen Zs are definitely a lot more open with, you know, being unhappy at work. That's a big one. You know, I get a lot of questions and have talked a lot on the different interviews I've done of, well, why do you think this is so big now? Like, why is this trending now? And I always say, I don't think it is something that is new. This is something that's been happening for a while. I mean, like I said, I was doing it. You've experienced it. You've seen people doing it. Everyone has been doing this concept of quiet quitting. It's just now Gen Zs are vocal about it. They're sharing it on TikTok, and then, you know, others are following suit. But I think we're much more open and willing to share the uncomfortable things online, which, you know, is a big part of growing up in social media age, and being willing to share that. You know, every time anyone in my family who's older than me looks at my YouTube channel, they're like, whoa, you share a lot of information on that YouTube channel about, you know, your past and this and that. And to me, it's not something that's a secret or something I need to hide or be ashamed of. That shame, I feel like, is another component that is taken away and stripped away more for Gen Zs. And, you know, people are a lot more accepting of different ideas and different paths that people are taking.
Let me contrast what you just said to what I've experienced, because this is a great comparison. So you're talking about growing up in an era where people are more comfortable vocalizing what they want, what they don't like, what's happening in their emotions, right? Not only are you more encouraged to do it, I think it's amplified by the fact that all your peers growing up for years on end have been doing it. So it's more of a natural state to just get it out there, talk about it, state what you want, and you feel it's more okay. I'll compare that to growing up, say when I was in my 20s on the road all the time in consulting. I'd see one of my direct reports, they're struggling and like they don't talk about it, right? And you'd catch them. It's like after a late night, you go to the bar, just catching up. Hey man, what's happening? And then you can see it in their eyes, they're like dead inside and they don't want to talk about it. And lo and behold, it's like they're burned out. Stuff is really troublesome at home. They hate their work, but you had to go to the nth degree to pull it out of them because there is no platform, there is no norm to externalize that. We grew up in the era of if you say you're dissatisfied, you might get kicked out and then you're done. And then that's scary because we didn't grow up in this era of externalizing and being vulnerable. And that's not a norm. You just take it, you grit and bear, right? And it's hiding inside. People are as frustrated, I think, at every level, right? At every age demographic. And the reality is, I think some groups are more comfortable externalizing and putting forward what they truly want and feel.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a great comparison and interesting to hear because, I mean, I've seen that myself, but it is almost mind blowing to think about that there's like a time where it is uncomfortable to share that, I like cried to my mentor on calls multiple times, like within my first 6 months at my job, which, I told that to my mom at some point and she's like, oh my gosh, you cannot do that. Like that is so bad. And I'm like, no, it's an environment where it's okay. And she's like, how is that possible? You can't cry at work. Like that's
There's
crazy.
no crying in corporate. Like, what are you talking about?
Exactly. Like it seems crazy, but it felt normal and it wasn't a big deal. And, it felt better. Like I was sharing my thoughts and how I was feeling about things. And it helped, honestly, even though it ended up with me leaving, but it helped me realize I needed to go, which, I think it would have taken a lot longer to realize if I wasn't so vulnerable with those conversations.
Yeah. I know there's a lot more we could unpack there. I just feel there's so much value, honestly, for millennial generations, Gen X and such, to learn from what you're doing, what your Gen Z cohort has been able to do and live, the value system. I admire it so deeply. And I think the rest of the world needs to absorb that and start to realize that being vulnerable and like listening to people like Brene Brown and like, let's like listen, like that is so valuable. Like bring this forward. It's going to be good for your work life, your home life. Take it to heart. So maybe there's more we can do there, but to compare and contrast that, I think is really important because people are wrestling with it. And that generational divide sometimes makes people really uncomfortable. I'll tell you, a lot of my clients say they're in their late 30s, early 40s. They're scared. They're looking back like, oh my God, this Gen Z workforce is so hungry. They're so sure of themselves. They state what they want. They bounce around. They don't have loyalty because they're so in control. Like that is scary for someone who's like, I'm 15 years in the system. Like I'm holding on for dear life, hoping for relevance. And you see this group of just confident people, at least seemingly confident, like putting on a certain set of values and attitudes, which is scary. And it's like, if we can all be more vulnerable, all live a life that's more authentic and true to what we truly want, this whole landscape can be better.
Right. No, definitely. And, that reminds me too, that I had a few people at my job actually that were millennial age that told me that they wish they had considered that sooner. They've been there for 15 years and they resonated with it. And they were like, that's amazing that you're leaving. In pursuing what you want to pursue. And the other thing that comes to mind that I've been sharing a lot lately that I think is super interesting, and this I feel like sheds light on why it's the case, is my channel demographics actually. I would say more than half of them are millennial and older. So most of my channel is not Gen Z, which I think most people assume that my channel demographics are going to be mainly Gen Z because I'm Gen Z and I'm sharing this. But, what you're sharing makes me realize that that could very well be why they're other generations are seeing that I'm sharing this other value system and willing to explain this and talk about these vulnerable parts of what I'm thinking. And it's different for them, which makes sense why I would have more demographics in other generations, which I never considered.
For sure. Hey, one last question that just came to mind. I'm just curious if this goes through your head. So when you exit corporate after a few years, is there anything that worries you about doing that? Are there things you're missing out on that are generally a part of the corporate journey that maybe you won't have access to now?
Yeah, that's a good question. Something that I do wish I had the experience of was being in corporate without the pandemic. I had started my job and moved up to DC from Florida after college, 2 months after the pandemic started in 2020. And my job, much like you're talking about, had a lot of traveling components that I didn't get to, take part in. So, there's a lot of benefits of corporate that, are interesting and fun for a time being. I still think I would have got to a point where I was, over it, but I sometimes wish that I would have gotten at least a taste of that. But I also know that I think it would have also been, that silver lining. I could have told myself to stay in it longer when I really shouldn't have. So it's not that I regret it, but that is something I feel like I missed out on.
Yeah. Yeah, everyone has to make the decision that's right for them in their unique context. There is no right decision. It's only the right decision for each and every one of us. I have a wide held belief, and I talk about this on the show all the time, that the great majority of people should stay in corporate. Not many people are wired for full scale entrepreneurship. I think my belief system is to do two things. Optimize your corporate situation to make it be on your terms, much like you did with quiet quitting, right? And look what happened. Look at the benefits. Look at the peace you got, and nothing bad happened. And then secondly, is find ways to flourish in addition to that. So I'm a big fan of people becoming entrepreneurial, right? Side hustling, the ability to grow new skills, see what you're capable of, and who knows where that goes. It could be a full-time thing. It could be something where you develop and cultivate purpose that you can't get inside of a corporate environment. It could ignite new income streams. But at the same time, the corporate job provides stability. It's just, I often find, I'm talking to, say, Gen Zers who are contemplating what you have, and my advice is just consider the variables, because there's plus and minuses. If the job is generally healthy, I mean, there is value in getting a foothold for years where you move up the ranks, you earn leadership skills, you get notoriety, titles that go on, LinkedIn, the ability to have new relationships. There's no right answer. Just understand the variables and the trade-offs based on what's in front of you. What are your options? And most importantly, what do you want your life to be? And it's not about deferring life to live later. It's about, what do you want life to be now? How do you make the best choices now? So it's just, I like laying out the variables and just making sure people are eyes wide open as to their decision.
No, that's a great point. Something that I definitely don't have is stability. And, that was a big decision I had to make if I was okay with that. And it's definitely something I'm very uncomfortable with. And, I would not want anyone else to have the feeling that I have if there isn't something to outweigh that negative feeling of feeling extremely unstable. And, when I do talk to friends who are getting their corporate paycheck and feeling that stability, they're putting money in their 401k. I mean, I haven't had health insurance in over a year now since I left my job. So, my benefits are gone. I'm still getting to that point where I'm able to get my own health insurance and start investing again. And that's uncomfortable and terrifying, honestly, so there's, like you said, there's a lot to it. It's more than just, go start your own business. You really got to decide and look at those different pros and cons and the values and say, what's the right thing for me right now?
Yeah. It's rarely a choice between extremes. The extremes being often like climb the ladder full force or go explode out onto the scene on your own as an entrepreneur. There's usually some middle ground, and then it looks different for each of us. Thanks for jiving with me on that. Can we do some rapid fire questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sweet deal. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received, Paige?
Ooh, this one is one of my favorites. I've been telling a lot of people lately. I always was someone who believed that confidence is something you figure out. You somehow gain confidence, and then you're able to use that confidence to do what you want to do. But really, confidence comes from actually taking action. So there's a point in your life where you have to do things that you have no confidence in. You feel super uncomfortable, have a lot of self-doubt, and that builds that confidence, which is what I will say I've been doing the past year, is building confidence. And now I'm really getting to a point where I actually feel confident in my abilities and myself.
Love that. Tiny wins create confidence.
Oh, yeah.
What's the worst piece of advice you've received?
To be financially successful, you need to budget, and not spend a lot of money. Stop buying the Starbucks, the coffee, etc. But, the reality is you got to invest money. You have to spend money to actually make money. Being able to invest in myself and, buy courses or hire a coach to help me was something I always thought was crazy, outside of my realm of capability. And why would I want to spend money on that when, I don't have the money? But realizing, well, I do have the money. I just need to reallocate that money to things that matter to me and, focus on making more money instead of trying to just consistently spend less.
Yeah. The irony is that self-development can't be done alone.
Yeah, right. You need others to actually develop yourself. That is so true.
So true. Going on the idea of limiting beliefs, what's one big limiting belief that workers face today?
that their degree and skills are only useful in their current fields. They're not transferable, which is something I really struggled with leaving my job and, starting to say I'm never going to go back to engineering. I felt like, well, I just wasted that degree, or, these skills I learned aren't going to be useful anywhere. And time again, every new client I've worked with, some random skill from some random class or project I worked on comes out, and I realize it's more than just, engineering was more than just numbers or this specific outcome. There's so many other skills you're learning in any job you get, any degree you get, and they can be transferred and they can be used other ways.
Yeah, develop range. It's so
Yeah.
applicable when you can pull on so many different experiences, worldviews, knowledge bases. What if you could invent one law, Paige, that everyone in the world had to follow? What would it be?
I love this question. I would invent a law that required everyone to look at. So, have you seen before on your phone where it says, like, here's your screen time for the week? I know some people have those screen time
Mhm.
notifications. And it says, this percentage was in this app or whatever. I would want there to be a way where this is tracked automatically so no one has to put an extra effort, but it tells you the percentage of time you spent each part of your money and this percentage of time you spent every minute of your time. So you can actually see what you're putting time and money into during each month. Because I found a lot of times people are investing their time and their money in things that are not any way aligned with what they actually want in their life. And, that's really where I was before I left my job. And I did an exercise once where I timed every minute of every day for a week and looked at what I actually spent my time on. And it's crazy to see how much time you just blow on things you don't care about at all, that are so easy to cut out. And, at the end of the day, it's not about, calculating every second and making sure you're productive every second, but just making sure, are you spending time with your spouse? If you care about spending time with your spouse, are you spending time learning if you care about learning, or playing piano if you're trying to learn piano? And, I find time and time again, I'm never fully aligned in that way, and it helps me restructure. So if that was something everyone had to look at each month, I think we'd all be happier.
What a beautiful dashboard that would be
Yeah,
for
right.
altering the way we spend our time and money. Beautiful. I love that. So this is only a few years in. So this is a really interesting question to ask you. I ask a lot of people this. If you were starting your career now at the end of 2022, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah. So a follow-up question before I answer is, I want to know, are you thinking starting your career as in, pre-college? Like if I was about to go into college to start the career, or I already have the degree and I'm going to start my career?
I love that you asked this because it actually raises the question, is college necessary, or should
Yeah,
I
right.
go on this path? Right. Like, I love that. Oh, Gen Z, I love you. This is amazing. Um, let's say you've graduated college and you've got a degree that's sensible. Now, what would you do?
Okay. Then I would say to not worry too much about what other people think you should do. That's, that could really be pre-college or post-college, but, don't focus so much on what field is projected to increase in demand. I feel like that was a big thing I focused on, is like all these statistics of jobs that we hear about it, like career fairs and things like that, focusing so much on these external factors. But really, what the whole concept of this podcast has been about, like, focus on what you want. Think about the skills you have. What are your talents and capabilities that you can really utilize? Because I find if you're able to do any job, it doesn't even matter what it is. You're in corporate, you're not in corporate, you're cat sitting like I was. If you're able to utilize those skills that you're best at, for me, that's something I'm always told I'm really easy to talk to. People feel comfortable and like they can open up to me. So cat sitting seems so irrelevant and random, but when I would meet people, they would feel super comfortable and trustworthy leaving me with their animals. And it was like I felt fulfilled because they felt like they could trust me. They felt comfortable. They were happy to go on their trips. And just that little small feeling of, wow, I just made someone's life better with a skill that I have that I'm already good at, made it all worth it. It didn't really matter what the job was at the end of the day and what I was doing.
Yeah. Step into your power. Spot on. Few things to wrap us up. What does uncaged mean to you?
So I would say that means, and I'm curious, I'm going to follow up by asking you what it means to you, but to me, it means not feeling trapped somewhere you don't want to be. And, really being open to, for lack of a better phrasing, spread your wings and grow in some way that you want to grow. Especially being in control of your life is something that I think is a big component of it too in my head. And having freedom to choose what that journey is going to actually look like, and not just the end goal, but what the actual journey and path looks like.
We are very well aligned. My whole mission is to help people go from caged amateurs where they're living a small life, they're accepting the defaults and they're not asserting themselves and being authentic and pushing themselves, going from caged amateurs to uncaged pros. The idea where you're taking your life seriously, your work seriously, it's really on your own terms, whether it's within corporate, whether it's outside of corporate, and just taking that mentality of going from amateur to pro. That's how you go from caged to uncaged. And it's an identity shift. You choose it, and then you day by day, action by action, make decisions that stack towards that identity, that make it real and make it inevitable.
I love that. I like how you said the identity shift is a choice. Like you're choosing the identity you want. I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. It goes back to the confidence thing, right? You want to be confident. You don't just become confident. You got to choose that you want to be confident and then start making those steps to actually embody that choice and that identity. Yeah. I love that.
So someone asks what you do, you don't give them your role title at your job.
Right.
It has nothing to do with that. It has to do who you are as a person, what you value, what excites you, what gives you energy. That's who you are.
Yeah, definitely. We are
Paige,
aligned.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like very spiritually aligned, like we're kindred spirits in the sense. Paige, where can people connect with you online? How can you help them?
Yeah, YouTube, definitely. Check me out on my YouTube channel. It's Paige West. I've been sharing my journey since leaving corporate and pursuing entrepreneurship and what that's looked like for me. And I share a lot of my financial updates and the good, the bad, and the ugly. So hopefully anyone else who's trying to make a similar shift that I did don't make as many mistakes as I did. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And I'm also working one-on-one with Gen Zs who are struggling to leave their traditional safe careers, and basically just breaking away from that external and internal pressures, helping them create a plan filled with aligned action.
Love that. Amazing. We'll get that in the show notes too. Any closing message you'd like to leave with the audience today?
Yes. Let's see. So I would say if you're feeling trapped where you're at right now, two things I would ask yourself. What's one thing you can do today that's going to get you one step closer to what you want to be? And, for example, for me, this was as simple when I was still in my 9-to-5 job as researching that course I talked about and figuring out what that plan looked like to eventually be able to afford to invest in it and, what skills I wanted to learn. And then the next question, this is one that I learned after leaving that I wish I had asked myself earlier is, what's a resource you have in your life that you're not utilizing right now that's going to bring you closer to your goals? I was very much thinking that I had to do everything on my own and that I was going to be able to solve all my problems on my own. But what I've realized is for me, it was the networking, the contacts I had. Once I was willing and able to reach out to people and share what I was doing, that's when I started seeing growth. And that's when I started seeing change in my life. I had a support system and people who were willing to help me. So even if it's just one person, what's that one person in your life that you think might be able to help you or invest in you that, is going to help you get to that next place in your life you want to be?
Love that. Paige, I think you embody so much of what the next gen workforce is bringing to the world, and it's very positive. It's a much needed shift in this world. The pendulum in my mind is shifting from employer to employee. I don't even like the notion of employee anymore. It doesn't even make sense. Yeah. But it's that self-directed professional that knows what they want and knows how to deliver that value wherever they are, and they can add value to everyone's life, but it's someone that's really standing true to their value system. So keep living that, keep giving the message out there. I'm proud to be able to help promote this with you. We'll get it out to the world and keep making a ruckus. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. I appreciate you having me on here and hope to connect more in the future.
Lots more to come. Thanks, Paige.
Thank you, Matt.
Hey, Matt here. Thanks for listening to Uncage Yourself. For show notes and more content like this, head over to uncageyourself.fm. And if you liked what you heard, I'd appreciate you leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Until next time, be well, my friend.